Hey guys, welcome to Whiskey and Literature. I'm your host, Captain Mike, and I'm excited because tonight we're drinking some bourbon, Redwood Empire Screaming Titan. Redwood Empire dropped 3 new whiskeys in 2023. They call them their small lot series. And I've only ever seen one of these bottles on the shelf, and it wasn't the Screaming Titan. I saw a post on Facebook, and the store was quite a ways away from me. I messaged a friend of mine, Andre, and with his help and some assist from his wife, Tina, meaning that she went and picked up the bottle, I now have a Screaming Titan. So I'm grateful to those guys for picking it up, and this video is for you, Andre and Tina. I joke sometimes that I don't have friends or people that I drink with, and that's kind of true and kind of not. I do have some friends, and I've even made some videos with some guys. And Andre specifically, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago, I mentioned that I had never had any Buffalo Trace. And he's like, I got you, buddy. Come on over. Went over to his Airbnb, and we had a nice pour and a nice evening. And that really is what this whole thing's about, right? I mean, yes, we enjoy the whiskey, but it's the memories you make and the friends that you share these with, whether they're your whiskeys or you have a good time out at a bar or at someone's house. And so I'm grateful for all those who have either shared whiskey with me or are my new friends that I've made through whiskey. So anyway, Redwood Empire Screaming Titan. Their small lot series, they had 3 bottles. First of all was the Devil's Tower, which I do have a bottle. I haven't opened it yet. When I went to Andre's house to pick this one up, I stopped at the liquor store that he bought this from. They didn't have any more Screaming Titan, but they had Devil's Tower, which is a high rye bourbon. I'm really excited to get into this one and look for that video coming up. Second bottle they put out was the Foggy Burrow, and that is a single malt. Interestingly enough, they don't say an American single malt, so I'm not really sure where they get the distillates from. I didn't see any information on that on their website. The third one was the Screaming Titan, which is a wheated bourbon. One thing that Redwood Empire does a nice job, I think, is with naming their whiskeys. If you don't know, if you're not familiar with them, they name all the whiskeys after a specific tree. So they have Grizzly Beast, Rocket Top, Lost Monarch, Emerald Giant, Devil's Tower, Screaming Titan. These are specific trees in the Pacific Northwest. And just a quick nerd fact, if you're interested in those specific trees, like if you're into trees, if you go to Redwood Empire's website, click on the whiskeys, click on a specific whiskey, and they have a link on each page that takes you to a page talking about the specific tree that each bottle is named after. And I think that's pretty cool information. Overall, their bottles, they're all the same, and it's a relatively ordinary plain bottle, but what they do really well is with the labels. And I'm not sure if you can see on here how well this translates onto the screen, but they do a really nice artwork on all of their bottles, and I think they're pretty cool. But more importantly to me and to all you whiskey nerds out there is all the information that Redwood Empire gives to you on their bottle. So let's talk about the specs and stats of Screaming Titan and then get to it. And I am a bit congested tonight, so if I sound a little nasally, that would be why. I'm just powering through it. And let's get to it. First of all, up here on this security tape or whatever this is, that says small lot series, batch number 1. On the front side here, it actually has some information about the specific tree, the height and the age of that tree. Coming down the bottle, the great artwork there, like they have again on all of their bottles. Screaming Titan, wheated bourbon whiskey. And just a primer for those who might be new or are not familiar with what does wheated bourbon mean. And I know that 2 years ago I couldn't have told you what does that mean. What's a wheat whiskey versus a wheated bourbon? I don't know. Probably most of the bourbons that you drink out there have 3 components: corn, rye, and malted barley. We know it's bourbon, so that's at least 51% corn. And so this here, it has, instead of a large rye component, it has a large wheat component. So we call this a wheated bourbon. And in fact, this throws another wrinkle in the equation. while it is a bourbon, it is also a 4-grain whiskey. So it has that wheat component, but it also has a small amount of rye in here. And I've noticed that quite a few of the Redwood Empire products, they are a 4-grain whiskey, and I do have a couple 5-grain whiskeys from Redwood Empire that have a 5th grain called Triticale, which I believe is a hybrid of wheat and barley, or rye and barley. Don't quote me on that. Triticale, we'll get to it eventually here. But let's go through the mash bill of this whiskey. It says 59% corn, 30% wheat, which is a huge amount of wheat, 7% rye, and 4% malted barley. So that's where we get the 4-grain whiskey connotation. Toasted and char 3, that's the levels in the barrels. So again, quickly, if it says it's a toasted barrel, that means they put a heating element inside of the barrel without a flame, and it's just kind of toast the inside of the barrel. This is char 3. Probably most of the bourbons you drink are a char 4 or a char 3. Char 3 just means that they put a flame as well inside the barrel for probably around 30 seconds. Don't quote me on that exactly, and if you know an exact number, and I'm not sure if each cooperage has a different definition of what a char 3 is. But I'm just gonna say it's about 30 seconds. All right. Barrels, 50. So this is the small lot series. So we have 50 barrels of whiskey that are blended together to make this batch 1 of the Screaming Titan. It's bottled at 96 proof. Again, batch 1, bottled in Sonoma County, California. The back of the bottle, I think, for most part, are not things I'm going to read. They have 2 pieces of information on the back of this bottle, which are interesting to me. And I think when you're buying a whiskey for the first time, it's kind of cool to read the back of the bottle and see what's going on with that, or what's the story behind that whiskey. The first piece of information that I find interesting is that we talk about, what is a wheated bourbon, and then it says it's aged at least 5 years. So don't know what the oldest component of this whiskey in here, but if it says it's aged 5 years, at least we know the youngest whiskey in this bottle is 5 years old, and that's pretty cool. So we talk about the tree groves, then we talk about the specific tree that this is named after, and also great information right here on the back of the bottle. And just one quick story before we get to that, but it relates to that. I worked with a guy yesterday who's a fan of Whistlepig whiskey. He's actually from Canada. And I mentioned to him yesterday that I opened my Whistlepig 18 recently, and that it was pretty good. And generally I don't totally care for Canadian whiskey, but Whistlepig is a Vermont distillery, but their ryes are all from Canada, except the 6-year piggyback. It has some component from Vermont in the newer bottles. But all those older Whistlepigs, they're all Canadian rye. And he, even being from Canada and being a fan of Whistlepig, wasn't aware of that fact, even though it says on the back of every bottle of Whistlepig from Canada, that is from Canada. So the point being, when you buy a bottle of whiskey for the first time, just glance on the back of the bottle and see what it says, because it will tell you where it's distilled at. So here we have distilled in California, Indiana, and Kentucky, bottled by Redwood Empire. So we know they source the whiskey in here from 3 states. They probably distill the California portion. The Indiana portion's probably MGP, the odds are. And then Kentucky, I don't know. If you know what the component of that Kentucky is in here, feel free to let us know. I would be interested in that. Okay, the MSRP is probably $79.99. I honestly don't know, because Andre didn't give me the receipt for this bottle, and this bottle was a gift to me from Andre. But when I stopped at the same store and I bought the Devil's Tower, this was $79.99. So I'm assuming this was the same price. And again, I don't know if that's the MSRP or just what that liquor store was charging for this series from Redwood Empire. But $79, okay. That's pretty in line. It's a little bit more, I'm sorry, than the Redwood Empire cask strength bottles, and a little bit less than the Redwood Empire bottled in bond bottles. Okay, anyway, Screaming Titan, cheers. So I had a pour of this earlier tonight, and I took it in the front room. And whenever I have a pour of whiskey and I go in the front and I'm watching some TV or whatever, I always give it to Mrs. Captain and let her have a little sip. But as I was handing it to her, I got this big doughy note out of the glass. And that's still what I get from this glass. It's a nice, it's got that big wheat component. 30% is a lot of wheat in there. And it just softens that note. It's a little delicate. I'm not gonna say faint, but it's not aggressive or very alive in the nose. It's just a soft, delicate nose. It's doughy to me with some sweetness. In fact, it reminds me of, have you ever had fry bread? Ever just made some dough and thrown it right on a campfire and then brush it with some honey? Boom, there you go. It's a little fry bread, just that doughy note that's soft, with just brushed with just not overwhelming honey, but just brush with it, just kind of just right there in the nose. I think it's nice. Anyway, cheers. That bready note is, that doughy note is missing on the palate. I'm not picking that up right now. It's some initial sweetness, quickly followed by some spice. And I didn't get any spice really on the nose, but now that doughy note's gone, and now it's replaced with some spice. It's some cinnamon and some spice and an underlying thread of sweetness right through there. Just a really nice mouthfeel. It's not too thin. It's not extra viscous. It's just right. And it's just coating me with some, not my entire mouth, but really on my mid palate. It is just leaving me with some spice, some cinnamon, but underlying everything is just some honey sweetness. I think it's a pretty nice pour. I've become a fan of this bottle. I wish it was more available, but it's been very difficult to research or to hunt one of these bottles down. And I couldn't have done it by myself. In fact, Andre, or Tina, reported that she bought that bottle and it was the last bottle at the store when she went there to pick it up. So extra thank you, Tina. Like, what do you think about Redwood Empire in general? You know, they're not a classic Kentucky distillery, of course. They were on the MGP train for a while. They still are, obviously, but they're making their own stuff as well with the bottle and bond products, which I think are really good. Price is getting up there, but you know, not bad. I equate them really closely to High West, kind of, you know, similar kind of story, where you're sourcing your whiskey, you're putting out a couple products that are your own distillates, and you mix your own stuff in the bottles, but you're still relying heavily on MGP and sourced whiskey. So I really put High West and Redwood Empire kind of in that same category. And I've really been a fan with pretty much everything from Redwood Empire that I've had. And this Screaming Titan is just leaving me, it's just kind of a lingering spice. It was a nice mouthfeel. It's just a bit of warmth coming down, not a huge amount, and that spice is just starting to dwindle off my tongue, and just an underlying sweetness. And I'm a fan. I'm a fan, again, like I said, of Redwood Empire, and the Screaming Titan I think is a great addition to their product line. So what are we looking at for wheated bourbons? Have Larceny, we have Maker's Mark, and there are others. I've had the Green River and the St. Augustine very recently as well. Maker's Mark and Larceny, I think, are obviously a much larger brands. I think most people are familiar with those. Also, I've had some of the Weller line. Specifically, I have a few bottles of the Special Reserve in my house, and I don't think that's anything really special, but it's an okay whiskey. I think Larceny is definitely better. I'm a fan of the Maker's Mark stuff. Now, I feel like this has more wheat in it than both Maker's Mark and Larceny. With 30% wheat in here, we have double Maker's Mark and 50% greater than the Larceny. So I think that's a difference. And we're also a 4-grain, we have that rye component. So you have a greater amount of wheat and you have that rye component in there. Just makes it a different twist than that Larceny and the Maker's Mark. And I think they've done a really nice job balancing all those blends in there and have a pretty great product. I'm happy to have this on my shelf, even at $79. I wish it was easier to find and I would pick up another one. Definitely looking forward to get into the Devil's Tower and keeping my eyes out for that Foggy Burl. I don't know how available it is. I've never ever seen one on the shelf anywhere here in the Bay. So I'll just close by saying that I think Redwood Empire does a really nice job. And again, I am happy to have this on my shelf. And I think if you can find a bottle, you should pick it up and add it to yours. All right, guys, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like it, subscribe to see more of my content. Again, I do both whiskey and book reviews. But for now, my friends, you know what to do. I hope you're reading something good and drinking something great. Turn those pages and stay thirsty. Cheers.